I love the works of Riichiro Onigaki. I also love the works of William Golding. Both of them are great writers, but one is taught in colleges, while the other one isn't. Why is that?
Anime can inspire creativity and encourage the development of critical thinking skills through its rich narratives and intricate character development. Universities have an ivory tower mentality, so they hesitate to teach anime because of the perception that it lacks academic rigor compared to traditional subjects. Bridging the gap between different forms of written literature and animated media, anime has the same laudable themes of overcoming adversity and speak to the human condition. But both of my parents, who are college professors, do not see it that way. They look down on anime. In order to combat this, my brother and I snuck into the professor's office and turned it into our podcast studio and filled it with manga and other anime items.
So please, join my brother and I as we try to convince our father, the professor, that anime is in fact literature and should be treated as such. Father, you know this is supposed to be a very serious podcast, yes? We discuss themes that are dark, morbid, we've gone over Young. We're about to go over Golding. I come dressed formal, and you come dressed as...
What are you talking about? I'm the Lord of the Flies, bro. You dude, every single time I get on this podcast, you're being so funny and sarcastic. The one that I am, you're making fun of me. I don't think so. I thought it was a good idea. Anyway,
stick to your roles.
Oh, what's my role? The stuffy professor. I can have a good time every now and then.
Okay. So, interesting topic we have today.
Yeah, I really think we do.
Dr. Stone and then Golding.
Lord of the Flies.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
that's why I have the pig mask, Nathaniel, for the Lord of the Flies.
Honestly, I think it's...
You should have ordered online like Sankyu's like wig with the green hair. That would have been hilarious. You know?
Nah. Honestly, I did think you looked kind of good with the pig mask on. Definitely an improvement.
Dude, when I had the pig mask on, I thought the first thing you were going to say is, get excited.
For what? Pork for dinner?
Pork chops for dinner. Have you ever had, what do you call it? Kind of like, what's that, jam sauce on top of pork chops? Maybe that's what we'll do later on today. Read Lord of the Flies and then go have some pork chops.
And then what?
Spicy jelly.
What are we going to do next? Kill David?
Well, I'm not the one wearing glasses in the room, okay?
No.
Okay. Back on topic. Lord of the Flies, Dr. Stone Season 3. Do you think we'll be able to link them? Yes or no?
That's the biggest question that I have. Of course, we spent the last couple of weeks. I've seen Season 3 of Dr. Stone. I read through Lord of the Flies. I read the manga of Dr. Stone. We have that available. That's my question, how you can make this connection. I would have thought it would have been an easier connection with Season 1 and Lord of the Flies because you have like the reemergence of a society and there's brute force. You kind of have like Senku's like the Ralph figure, you know what I mean? And you have Tsukasa, who's pretty much like the Jack figure and all this kind of stuff that's going on. Season 3 is a completely different structure. Season 3 is, if anything, kind of like a point A, point B, kind of like Terra Incognita. They're exploring out from Japan and going to Treasure Island, you know, talking about, you know, some of the early stuff we discussed. But I'm curious to see how you're linking. Let me ask you this question. We were having a brief discussion about thematic topics earlier. What's the theme that you're going to hit for not Dr. Stone, for Lord of the Flies?
Well, for Lord of the Flies, I have 4 major points. Civilization versus savagery, big part of the book.
Sure.
Loss of innocence, another huge part of the book.
Huge part, right?
Nature of evil, an even bigger part of the book. And leadership and power.
Right. If you were doing any kind of like even basic review from high school to college of Lord of the Flies, those are some of the 4 major points that you would hit, right? Those are the themes in the literary analysis that you would go through. You can go through the topics of the philosophical interpretation, the sociological structures, whatever that may be. Fine. It makes sense. That's how, if anyone's read the Lord of the Flies, the way that you should analyze it. How are we going to compare that to Dr. Stone, specifically Dr. Stone Season 3?
Well, you'll find out later in the episode. But first, what I kind of want to cover with Dr. Stone is the mythological aspects of the ship's name.
The Perseus.
I also like, you said it's more of like exploration. I don't think more of exploration more as it is a colonial model.
Oh, so you're going to bring up what we talked about last week about colonial exploitation, which is one of the arguments against the Coral Island. It makes sense that Dr. Stone Season 3 may have some of those same themes there too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Major themes, more so than Season 2, because they're literally sailing to a new island to find the supposed treasure that Senku's dad left behind for him.
Right. Okay. So which one would you like to hit first?
I'd say let's hit Dr. Stone first.
Okay, you want to get excited first?
Yep. You should get excited too, because we got an awesome clip for you. David, roll it.
In Season 3 of Dr. Stone, New World, Senku Ishigami and his ever-growing kingdom of science set sail beyond the familiar shores of Ishigami Village, chasing the mystery behind the global petrification. With the brilliant sailor Ryusui Nanami joining the crew and the construction of the high-tech ship Perseus complete, the team embarks on a bold expedition across the ocean. Their destination is Treasure Island, rumored to hold a time capsule left by Senku's father, Byakuya. But what awaits them is far more dangerous than anyone expected. The island is ruled by the cruel Ibara, who wields a petrification device called the Medusa. Cut off from their allies and outnumbered, Senku and a small band of companions must rely on wit, science, and a little luck to turn the tide. After a tense series of strategic battles, they finally outsmart Ibara, reclaim the Medusa, and secure a major victory. The journey doesn't stop there. With the Medusa in hand and new territory gained, Senku sets his sights on solving the food shortage problem threatening the Kingdom of Science's future. Through the introduction of agriculture, most notably wheat cultivation, the team transforms Ishigami Village into a thriving society capable of supporting their ambitious plans. But even this achievement is just a step toward the greater goal, to revive all of humanity. As Season 3 draws to a close, the crew plans their next voyage to North America to establish Corn City, a hub for producing revival fluid on a mass scale. With the looming question of the enigmatic why man still unanswered, Senku stands on the edge of a new frontier, one that could bring humanity's salvation or reveal an even greater threat.
I tend to try to be like a kind of sensitive with my critiques on any anime that we're doing so far. And so far we've done Solo Leveling and we've done Dr. Stone. I mean, it's a combination of like, now this is the 6th episode focused specifically on anime. And I understand that my goal is to kind of try to learn and see the value of anime, just to have things balanced. And I mean, there's nothing wrong with checking your bias. You should kind of check your bias. If all of a sudden I have a bias against anime, I mean, there should be something that's checked there. That doesn't mean that I don't end up in the same conclusion if I don't consider that anime is considered the same level of, like, say, higher literature, and we've had that conversation. However, I'm letting you know ahead of time right now that I'm going to be a little bit aggressive when it comes to Dr. Stone Season 3. And the reason why is on almost every level, since we are doing a deeper critique and deeper analysis, I did not like it. Now, I don't want to play the antagonist here, like just the antagonist, but I thought the development of the storyline was kind of lazy. The idea of it just expanding is kind of lazy. And let me tell you one of the things that I thought that I really didn't like. It's like they skip like 300 years of industrialization within a period of like 3 weeks. And it's just convenient. It's like the kind of like the Mary Sue, the unearned, that, oh, we're just going to do this and show by through exposition that it's positive. Like they pretty much make a steam engine with radar, right? They have all these technologies that would not be possible and available to develop during that period and during that time. But it's kind of like the idea of what I told you in one of the episodes, that I had that professor I really did not like, had a sense of disdain for, when he would always say, just go with it. And it seemed that there's a lot within specifically this kind of like episode, which is just go with it. I mean, they make diving air tanks to go diving and retrieving like
The stone
the statues. You know what I mean? Like any problem that they have, you want to know. I understand you guys are under 21, and I'm too old to do any kind of drinking games. But you know the concept of a drinking game. Whenever you hear a line repeated, you have to take a drink, right? We would die of alcohol poisoning if we took a drink every single time they said the word science. You know, to answer any problem, it's science. Just the word. To have their battle cry is like science. It's like, oh my gosh, we're all dying of the bubonic plague. Don't worry, science. And all of a sudden they take this magical pill that they just so happen to construct. And I understand that, honestly, Dr. Stone, in my opinion, is aimed at younger crowds to kind of get them get excited about science and all that. I am not the demographic for Dr. Stone. What's that time traveling anime I really want to watch?
Steins Gate.
I heard Steins Gate is really kind of like interesting and intellectual, right?
It is.
Right. And we may get, you were talking to me about it, but I would like to see it because I would assume that's for an older crowd. So for my critique majorly on Dr. Stone, I hate making something prescriptive to a given taste. Like, since this isn't making me happy, it's not valuable, but that's what you're asking me to do. And on this level, I just thought that the progression of the storyline, which I'm sure that we will hit, there are just so many things that are done that aren't very nuanced, is not very creative. It's just like some cartoon would go with it.
Okay. I have a question for you.
Go ahead.
So if you know that it's aimed at not your demographic, why are you criticizing it so hard?
Well, like I'm saying, I'm the one here behind the mic having the conversation about it. It would be almost disingenuous to pretend that I was 13 years old critiquing this, and the entire forum is to try to do a collegiate review of this. I get that. My point is, I'm not completely undercutting it. I'm saying within our discussion now, I am going to be highly critical of it because this is now the environment of the zone that we're in when discussing Dr. Stone. I'll give you an example. What's the name of the boat? First of all, it is absolutely ridiculous that they can build that boat to begin with. Number one, with the technology that they have. It's ridiculous.
Okay, well, Tsukasa revived. There's a part where they're like, there's no way we'll build this boat. And then Senku was like, you forget Tsukasa revived an army of these high schoolers that are somehow bodybuilders.
Sure, labor does not equate to technology.
Look at the pyramids.
Dude, if you look any research in the pyramids, there's this discussion of who really built the pyramids, number one. But the second one, so that's architectural technology, right? And there's technologies right now that we have in the 21st century that we don't know how to duplicate, places like the Gaza pyramids or Machu Picchu or other places, or the ziggurats, where we're amazed with some of the stuff that they were able to get done. But we're not talking about architecture and stonemasonry. We're talking about the development of almost like the steam engine. You know what I mean? You would have to have specific kind of tools within industry to even produce some of those ideas. And so, for instance, it's hilarious how they discuss creating a vacuum tube. Are you kidding me? That would never work in a modern time. But this is my point, and this shows a weakness of my interpretation. What's the name of the boat?
Perseus.
Why is it called the Perseus?
I don't remember exactly why it's called.
Well, Perseus in Greek mythology, you know what he did, right?
Yeah, wasn't he the one that saved everyone from the Kraken and defeated Medusa?
Right, he beats the Gorgon Medusa, gets her head, and then defeats the Kraken by turning him to stone. Turn to stone. Huh. You know?
Maybe that's why they named it
that's kind of
Perseus.
tongue-in-cheek. We could tell you about the episode. That's an episode that everyone gets turned to stone multiple times. Who's the bad guy? Ibarra?
Ibarra,
right.
He's the main bad guy.
And the Medusa kind of
weapon.
I guess they're thematic. But if you wanted to follow real kind of Greek mythology structure, this is the Greek mythology structure of Jason and the Argonauts. And actually, one of the reasons why they probably stayed away from the structure of Jason and the Argonauts because it plays into your colonial question that you're going to have later. You know what I mean? So Jason and the Argonauts is a story of Jason and his soldiers going from point A to point B looking for the golden fleece. They need the golden fleece in order to come back and heal their country and heal their land kind of stuff. And they have to steal it in order to appropriate it, right? And that's the excitement. When they're going to point A to point B, they have all these obstructions in the way. Then they finally get there. They steal the golden fleece. They go back and they're the heroes. That follows a very exploitative colonial model, right? So if we're going to first talk about, and if you want to shift to that colonial discussion about how Dr. Stone Season 3 is considered to be something positive when in reality it follows an aggressive colonial model that the very people who criticized the Coral Island for having is doing the exact same thing within this anime, and they would approve of it because it's under the secular humanist structure of science. And the only kind of definition or the only kind of moniker or word that you can give to that's most accurate is that of hypocrite.
I know how much you like theory. You even stated it before.
I don't know. Did I ever tell you my story about my relationship to theory in college?
I think you did. I don't know.
So what ends up happening is if you really want to know what I do as a historian, I'm what's called an intellectual historian. And that sounds kind of high-minded, but it's not. What it does is I told you this, history does one of three things, or a combination of them. It asks a question, tests a theory, or it kind of like fills a gap in the literature. I like applying theory. In the last book that I wrote, all it was a theoretical model of interpretation when it came to foreign policy during the interwar period between World War I and World War II. And so I have my degrees both in history and in English. And when I was going through graduate school in English, there's this class called literary theory that you had to take before you graduated. You had to take it. And typically graduate students hated it. They would wait to the very last second to take this class. Like the last class they took was literary theory. When I started graduate school in English, or English lit primarily, guess what was the first class I took?
That one?
That one. It was the first class I sent. I would have taken it. I took it with a guy named Dr. Barry. I would have taken it 10 times. I loved literary theory. I love the talking about ideas and the application of them, jumping through discussions and exploration. That's why a lot of times when I talk, it's not about being right. It's about testing. It's almost like scientific in the way that you test a theory. Does this work? Does this interpretation function? A lot of it has to do with worldview. A lot of it has to do with the way that you perceive things. And theory just gives you a multiple flavor kind of like approach. It's like cooking with a wall full of spices instead of just one specific tunneled vision kind of taste. It gives you kind of these fusion and creativity as a sense of exploration. Anyway, if you ever want to see the way that, I'm sure I do this all the time, that people who have their terminal degree, how they just talk in circles and nothing makes sense, you should go take a literary theory class in graduate school. Because the teacher would come in and like point to a student like, okay, today we're talking specifically about the deconstruction movement. I would like to go over Derrida and how he applied the postmodernist idea of undercutting language to shift its meaning in order to have the construction of meaning questioned when it comes to nomenclature. One of the things we want to focus on primarily is phallologocentrism. Evaluate this piece when it comes to that theory. And then all of a sudden the graduate students say something like this. It's like, well, if you consider exactly what Derrida was considering when he wrote the piece on the theoretical point of view of phallologocentrism and how he would apply it to the given period when he was writing it, you can postulate that the conversation and the discussion when he was demonstrating his theoretical, and they would just go on. It was amazing. You would sit back and hear this student talk for like 15 minutes and say absolutely nothing. And that it's like filibustering. And at the end of it, you're just like start clapping like, bravo, dude. You just went for 15 minutes and said absolutely nothing. You know what I mean? And so when you get to theory, that's what you're trying to balance. You're trying to balance almost like the nomenclature, the lexicon of like higher, what you would call Latinate descriptors, but to have a sense of substance here. So what we're doing right now in Dr. Stone is a theoretical interpretation of a topic that's not very simple. So what lens do you want to use in its interpretation?
Specifically literary.
Okay, but what else?
Well,
you mentioned it earlier, colonialism.
yeah, I know,
right.
But
Wait. You're going to use the lens of colonialism. That's not an easy. We mentioned last time Frantz Fanon and Edward Said, The Wretched of the Earth and Orientalism. These are not simple concepts to understand. So you have to break them down to a couple pieces, and maybe we can hit a couple pieces. So what's the first piece on the topic you would like to hit?
Edward Said, mainly. What happens is, I'll go back to my main point. Well, one of my main points. Civilizing the primitive, right?
Right, which is inherent to the colonial question. Is the very idea of colonial question is you have an expansionism and you justify the aspects of your aggressive subordination of other cultures and peoples by saying that they're primitive and that, you were civilized. I think one of the words that's used is savagery. they create this dichotomy between the civilized and the savage, which then privileges the civilized to force their point of view and force their kind of exploitation because they're trying to civilize. We talked about the white man's bird in Kipling last time. It's the same concept. Okay, so let's go and hit some of the authors you want to consider.
Edward Said, you mentioned
Which book by Edward Said?
Specifically, Cultural and Imperialism.
Okay.
Culture and Imperialism. There's a quote: "The idea of civilizing others has historically masked domination through cultural superiority."
Right. So it's a superiority and subordination based off of what you would consider to be more almost like racial tones, that our civilization, our race, our people are better than yours. So we have the right and the manifest destiny to do so. Okay. What else?
Another one is Johannes Fabian. You know that guy?
Mm-hmm.
There was a book he wrote, Time in the Other. Interesting title, in my opinion.
The othering, right?
The Othering?
No, but time in the other is there's a process by which you can do such humane treatment and kind of like excuse your violent actions by what's called othering someone, that they're not human, they're not part of you, they're another.
How anthropology makes it object, something like that. It's the entire title is Time in the Other, how anthropology makes it object.
Yeah, it makes it into an object to be studied. It dehumanizes. That's one of the things that's mentioning.
He argues that anthropology historically places the savage, like you just said, outside of modern time, reinforcing power imbalances. He literally...
Don't move on yet from the theory, because now we have to apply it to Dr. Stone. One of the things I think is kind of like an error, a mistake. Some of the things that colonialism very much criticizes, or the theory of colonialism, when it comes to any empire, any kind of like people like exporting their values and exporting their kind of like their worldview into seeing other people as others or as savages, and the civilizing principle. If this applies to Dr. Stone, it's just glossed over and it's just like deserted up, that it doesn't look as bad or as abrasive. But they're doing the very same thing. You have Treasure Island, supposedly the people there are primitive, right? They aren't the people that have been reawakened. They're the people who were the genealogically progression of those who were born in this period and this time, that are still kind of like backward, that are still kind of like rubish. They are the savages. They don't know what's going on. And here comes Senku with this cohort of people now with all their technology and all their science. Since Senku, we talked about this last time in comparing to Sakasa, Senku is considered to be someone who's doing this in order to create a sense of prosperity and to help society and to build after, this terrible calamity of this petrification. But they want something. They need something from Treasure Island. They're going there to take, whatever the reason may be, and you can justify it. Why can you justify that Senku has a right to go to Treasure Island and take, what was it? They would need platinum?
Yeah.
Right. And to take platinum. In my mind, there's two justifications that's given in the anime. What are the two justifications?
He needs the platinum to make more revival fluid.
Right. To save people. So he has the right to take it because he's going to save other people. So the utilitarian of, since more people are going to benefit from being reawakened, he has a right to take it. What's the second reason?
Because what, like they're savages? I don't
Yeah,
know.
because of Ibarra, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because right now there's fighting. They make Ibarra out to be this caricature of a bad guy, which then justifies Senku then saving the people of the island.
He is a bad guy.
No, but I'm saying that's the structure of the story. The structure of this story is substantiating and justifying Senku going in and stealing and taking it because he's still that savior, salvific kind of like structure. He's going into another island, and he isn't there to help them. He doesn't know what he's going to find. They actually go in surreptitiously and intentionally secretive, like they won't find us here, right? But immediately the first interaction with the inhabitants is aggressive because they throw the Medusa kind of like petrifying weapon and petrify everyone on the boat, correct?
Everyone except like a few
That
people.
then justifies Senku's aggression in taking the petrification fluid. Same thing when it came to the colonial model. Whenever you had Europeans or Americans going to different kind of like Polynesian islands or to India or to Africa, they're like, look at these savages, look at these cannibals. It is the civilized savage structure. It's still there and it's playing just in this. It's just a different justification for having this colonial expansion and this extension. They're like building into the storyline reasons to excuse what Senku is doing, even though it fits perfectly within the civilized kind of like the civilized and the what is it? Like brutalize the savage model.
Okay, well, Senku didn't want to come in and just conquer their land.
Oh, yes, he did.
No, he didn't want
You
to.
know why he did? Let's say he went in nicely and asked for the platinum. He's like, no.
No, but what happens?
No, what would happen in that scenario? If Senku came to the island, like, could I please have the platinum? We have trinkets to trade with you. Exactly what the Europeans did with the Native Americans. And all of a sudden, the people who were local to Treasure Island said, no, we don't want to give you the platinum. What would Senku do? Okay, I guess I'll just go back.
Well, put it to you this way. Why would they say no?
It doesn't matter. The point I'm trying to say is Senku was there to get something. He would get something, period. And he could justify it 1,000 different ways in his head. That is the colonial model when it comes to the civilized and the savage.
Okay, but even if you justify it in your head, is there still... Does that mean that it can't be justified at all?
No. What we're doing is we're filling within the theory of colonialism. And what I'm saying within this theory, Senku's doing the exact same thing that the colonial model is critiqued for. The same kind of critique when it came to the Coral Island of people coming in like, this is just following some ridiculous colonial model. Then all of a sudden you jump forward now to like Dr. Stone and people are celebrating and justifying it. What's hilarious is America and other first world countries, or not even, I don't like following the model of the first, second, third world. People actually don't know what that means. But when you look at even America right now, it doesn't matter what political party you are, they still justify colonialism. They're just doing it by different means because they're exporting their worldview and their value system. What's crazy is 100 years ago, they evaluated and they call it brutal and they call it unjust and they call it subordinating and they call it racist. Now they've grabbed the exact same model and they applied it, but they filled it with the idea of scientific modernity and prosperity, and they're forcing the same colonial model. Anything that moves towards globalism is colonialism on steroids. And so when you hear people like, we have to have this global community, we have to have no borders, we have to have everyone like the same global citizen, there has to be a leading value system that followed the same subordinating model, because there's people out there that say, I don't want to follow this world system. I don't want to follow your new contrived culture and your new society, and that I have to abandon my own identity. The same criticisms that were made 100 years ago are now being justified by the same means, by the same people who just think that the worldview they're promoting is more permissible and valuable to them.
You know, you're kind of like accusing Senku of being colonialist, right? But he's more or less just, it's almost like scientific imperialism.
It's the same thing. It's another kind of like leaf on the tree of colonialism. One of the forms of colonialism is scientific kind of colonialism. Do you know what scientific colonialism is?
Yeah, isn't it just like colonialism but peaceful, right?
Well, colonialism in itself is still seen as a subordination of the people. It's like different means. It's like if someone's trying to invade your house, they can try to break through their door. They can come in and try to sell you something. They can show up with a blueberry pie. But in the end, they want to get in and they want to appropriate what's not theirs. Scientific kind of like colonialism is still using technology in a non-violent form, but it's still emphasizing a worldview that's based off of development, that's based off of tech, and it still follows a very close exploitation model. I'll give you an example. Everyone's so high and happy when it comes to like EVs and using kind of like electric cars and all this kind of stuff, but some of the mining for the cobalt and for the lithium and the other things that are needed is still an exploitive model. Like, for instance, have you seen the cobalt mines in Africa? You can take 2 seconds to go to YouTube and take a look at the horrendous conditions that children are working in. It's still an exploitive model. It's considered to be nonviolent, but if all of a sudden you come in and you labor for something and I take 95% of the profits, it's still a form of oppression that's there. The difference is it's not using a whip and it's not using force and it's not using violence as coercion. It's using economic means and scientific developments for it. When you limit the information and the technology to other countries that would benefit them and manifest their own national identity and actually making money off of their own natural resources, that's not what we're talking about here. I would say scientific colonialism or scientific imperialism is even more deceptive, even more kind of pernicious in its application, because it's pretty much robbing other people blind and keeping them in their state of oppression.
Yeah, well, you use the example that anyone could break into your house using different methods, but put it to you this way, almost imagine if you're trying to break into someone's house to steal what they stole first, what they're hoarding that was rightfully yours.
That's not a good analogy or comparison,
but
because
Senku's
when you look at
dad, like, gathered the stuff.
What right does he have to Senko's dad's stuff? What right does he have to the platinum? What? because he's the progenitor?
No, Senku's dad gathered it in hopes that Senku would revive, and that all that stuff was for Senku to hopefully revive humanity and restart the entire thing.
Okay, that's fine. So let's say all of a sudden I have a pocket watch I want to give to my great grandson, and in the process it gets taken by someone else and they own it. So that great grandson have the right to that pocket watch.
Does he not?
So yeah, see, we're talking about something different now. You're talking about the intent of ownership and principles of ownership right now. There is no question that right now what he needs is on someone else's island, on someone else's structure of a culture and a society that's there, and he's going in to take it. But once again, this is one of the things I think is cheap within season 3, is they're excusing the colonial models by giving solid motivations behind it. Like that argument making is a good argument. The salvific argument that he wants to like unpetrify people. He wants to develop technology. He wants the utilitarian benefiting everyone. I get it, but it's still following a colonial model. And I think you're exactly right. This hits perfectly scientific imperialism. But if you look within any kind of academic discourse at the college or graduate level, no one will look at the scientific kind of imperialism and call it a good thing. They'll still see it as coercive. They'll still see it as oppressive. And we see that currently happening right now in the 21st century. So there's more of a critique here that we need to apply when it comes to the theoretical application than a justification. Since this is kind of like an anime, since this is kind of like a manga, they're conflating who the good or bad guy is. Abara is clearly the bad guy because he kills people, he undercut the real chieftain, he's being kind of like even sexually abusive because he's looking to like marry and control the island, all this kind of stuff, to be the unjustified leader, which then excuses Senku's model of colonialism.
Okay, so what? You're saying that his civilization has a potential for violence?
Absolutely. Even though it's considered to be nonviolent, when you have a scientific kind of like imperialism, is still a form of violence. It just isn't direct. If you create the circumstance economically for people to labor to death, it's still a form of violence, even though they're not boots on the ground. The British learned this really early because especially when they tried to control India for the period that they did, they called India the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. They realized that physical force doesn't always work. They don't want to have insurrections. They don't want to have warfare. So what they do is they create a system. I don't know if you know the story of the way that Britain was able to control India. There's a period during the Irwin Pacts when Britain started to realize that they were losing India. They were losing control of India and the British Empire was on decline. And so the British came up with a genius scheme. What they did is they went into India and like, you know what, you want your own independence and you want your own kind of like autonomy and controlling yourself. And we agree, you should. And so what they did is they went in and started to put certain figures within an Indian structure of government, but they would have what was called suzerainty over it. They would have a level of economic control. So they went in and they said, okay, you have your power structure in India, you have your people in place, but since we are protecting you from other nations that will destroy you from the outside, since we do have to send our navy in to kind of protect you, we want you to pay a sense of fealty to us. And so India's like, okay, we'll pay a sense of fealty. That makes sense. What would you like? Would you like lumber? And like, no, we don't want lumber. It's like, would you like precious metals and stones and like stuff like that? No, we don't want that. And like, well, what do you want? And they said, we want the British pound sterling. That's paper. You know how much the people of India valued the British pound sterling? Not at all. Fiat money means nothing to the majority of the world except the nation in which it's distributed in. And so it was a psychological warfare. Then the Indians were like, okay, so if we all of a sudden pay you in the British pound sterling, then you'll leave us alone. And what they didn't realize is they were then making the Indian economy dependent on control of the British pound sterling fiat money by Britain. And so they control their economy, and at any point, at any moment, they could collapse the Indian economy and send them back into the Stone Age. That is a softer kind of colonialism, but it's still the same form of coercion that's there. And this is the point I'm trying to make. Senku is just using a softer form of it, but it's still within the colonial model, which is what I thought you brought in to critique to begin with.
Okay, so I'm the one that did bring up the colonial question, and I apologize. I kind of went really criticizing Dr. Stone.
It's one of those things you have to understand when it comes to theory. You're using what's called a critical lens. Right?
Very critical.
Like imagine we sat down and we're like, oh, we like it. We just like it. No, what you're trying to do is break things apart to their pieces and critique it. I mean, You know the difference between analysis and critical thinking, right?
Yeah, isn't that? Don't you have to analyze before you critically think?
Right. So one of the descriptions I give all the time is almost kind of like having a car engine. If you have a car engine and you take it apart and understand how the pieces work, that's analysis. Putting them back together and showing it how it can work better is like critical thinking. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So with critical thinking, you're making an assessment of how to improve. And how do you make an assessment of how to improve? By saying what can be improved, right?
Okay.
So any form of critical analysis, that's what's called, is you're critiquing something. So I understand that it's coming across as a little harsh, maybe. But I said at the beginning I was going to be a little bit more abrasive or aggressive with it. Maybe we can shift the conversation right now and stay on Dr. Stone season 3. What is it that you liked about it? Like, did you like the season? Because it is distinctly different. They don't follow the same model. So the first one is everyone's waking up. You have the balance of Tsukasa and Senku. Then you had the Stone Wars. Then you have this kind of like adventure A to B, terra incognita kind of
I've
structure.
always liked those things. I've always been into Robinson Age. This is actually more of Robinson Age.
It is a Robinson Age, right?
Yeah, I've always been into Robinson Age, stranded on a desert island. Not really Lord of the Flies per se, but just like I've always loved the sea. I've been drawn to the sea. Calls me.
Oh, you're a seaman?
What? Wait. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, maybe I know your granddad has a boat. You know, maybe we should spend some more time out on the lake or on the ocean fishing.
Well,
when I was growing up, I had a lot of family in Miami,
mm-hmm.
and I had an uncle who was like my favorite uncle, and he would take me deep sea fishing, and we would go spear fishing and stuff like that. And I remember the first time I had been like 16, he took me out, and he hands me a spear gun, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, I've never shot this before. What are the rules to using a spear gun?" He's like, "It's very simple. If you see a fish and there's someone next to it, don't shoot. If you see a fish and there's someone behind it, don't shoot." Do you understand that? I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Let's go." So I spent a lot of my time with my uncle going to go fishing. So fishing, son, there is something without question romanticized about, going exploring. I mean, I don't know if we're over hit Herman Melville's kind of like a Moby Dick, but it starts with "Call me Ishmael" when life literally gets oppressive and I can't handle things, and things
he
are
likes
bad.
to go on a boat, right?
I have to go out to the ocean. I mean, tell you the truth, what happens sometimes, we can move away from the colonial model. But what happens a lot of times, which is a big promotion of colonialism, is sometimes when it's romanticized. That Robinson Age, that kind of like going to a place that's unknown with different tribes, different people, different animals, and exploring the unknown. So there is a big romanticized aspect to Robinson Age. Did you do any research on the romanticized aspect? I mean, you had two sources you looked up on it.
Yeah, well, kind of. So what happens is I didn't have any sources looked up on that. You were getting confused for the part we just did.
Yeah.
What happens is it was my 5th point, exploration as a romanticized adventure, right? So the issue, the journey across the sea and discovery of new land is portrayed with excitement and heroism, right?
Right.
Adventures in every story. I don't think there are very few stories that can function without adventure, even like
but
romantic
it's the terra
adventures.
incognita structure. You're going to a land that's unknown, a place that's unknown, people that are unknown, getting out of that which is familiar and comfortable, right? But let's go back to the question. Did you like season 3?
Yes, of course. I mean,
What did you like about it?
like I said, I've always liked that type of adventure, being out at sea. At first, it was confusing because I jumped into season 3 without watching this previous episode that you were supposed to watch.
What was that?
I don't remember. It had something to do with this character. His name was... What was his name? I have it right here. Ryusui. That was his name. It was the introduction of Ryusui, where they did this entire thing of journeying to an island full of people that knew how to pilot ships.
Yeah.
Selecting the best one, reviving him, this whole thing. And I jumped straight into season 3 because Crunchyroll at the time didn't have that episode. So I was confused.
Yeah, Ryusui is quite the character.
Oh,
There's nothing. It's funny how they align colonial exploration with like an exaggerated arrogance. And he's literally like, "I own everything." He's like, and he even creates a fiat money system. Starts to print his own money. He's like, "Well, we have to create economy," and Seiku's fine with it because it's starting to put the structure of an economy in place. But immediately you start to see the concept of capitalistic kind of ownership. So now they're marrying capitalism with colonialism, and they're romanticizing it without question.
Yeah. The first part of the season did go kind of slow with all the farming, but I liked it. I mean, they made a hot air balloon, ventured across a 2 days. They ventured a 2 days journey within 2 hours. It traveled kind of slow, but then the second part where everyone got frozen and you're like, what was going on?
There's so much excitement you can have in an agrarian society. But I mean, my opinion is, once again, just personally, I didn't enjoy season 3 that much, just because I knew that we were going to cover it with a colonial interpretation, and so I was using a critical eye. But once again, it's kind of like one of my premises of what I'm trying to tell you right now. We are kind of like trying to evaluate anime at an academic level. So it's kind of hard for me to sit down and just enjoy it, because the argument is it's just not entertainment. Like, for instance, you can grab any piece of literature. Let's say Herman Melville's Moby Dick. You can sit down and enjoy it, but if you're trying to use it within like a literary critique, then you have the analysis coming in. Then you have the critical thinking coming in. So let's go ahead and jump to, because I don't want to be too pressed for time, let's go ahead and make the shift over to Lord of the Flies, and then we'll have some comparative analysis after that.
Thank you guys so much for checking out my channel. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you want to see more content like this, hit the subscribe button, like, and share the video for more. And if you want to see more videos like this, hit the notification bell for more videos when they're uploaded. And so we can show our father that anime is worth his time.